Hello and welcome to the Athletic NBA Show. I'm Dave DeFore, and it's Friday, and that means it's Nerder, she wrote. Joining me as they do each and every week, Seth Partnow and Mo Keel. Do you guys have the madness? You guys are the games
Furman,
on?
Furman. That was unbelievable. What are you
First day of the
doing?
tournament. First day of the tournament. We got a game winner. Virginia's out. Oh, it's
Poor
amazing.
John Hollinger, who was at the game.
More proof that
Tough
basketball,
break for a nice kid.
This is just my yearly reminder. Well, I guess it's now a couple times a year because of the play-in, but basketball is at its best in single elimination tournament format. It's fantastic. There's a reason, like the chaos is just, it's amazing. It adds to the experience. So are you guys watching?
Calm down about
the
the
games
best.
on right now?
Do not.
So you're not working and watching games like everyone else in America?
I know I've actually been working today.
Yeah.
But
instead of doing both.
But after we get done here, we're probably switching over to working.
Yeah, I think once we finish up the pod, I'm going to hang out with a cold beverage and watch some games. So I'm looking forward to that this afternoon. Guys, I thought this would be a good time to talk a little bit about scouting. The draft's coming up, the lottery's coming up, and we know all about Victor Wembanyama, and we know about Scoot Henderson, these guys playing in the G League. But tournament time seems to be one of the most chaotic times for scouts, for front offices, and for draft boards. So I kind of want to talk a little bit to you guys because you've been inside these rooms during this time of year. What the hell is it like as an NBA team looking at draft prospects playing in the tournament? I mean, I know that there are definitely guys that go on these runs. They get on a heater in the tournament and the draft stock goes through the roof. Kemba Walker was probably one of those guys, right? One of the most memorable postseason runs in college basketball history for one guy.
I think Kemba's was still pretty high up.
He was a good player already.
It was high up on boards. It just kind of helped with that. I don't know about Seth's experience with it, but just in my run, it was actually busier during the conference tournaments. A lot of our scouts would be out at conference tournaments. Here's the thing about the NCAA tournament for scouts. They don't get the great seats that they do for games during the season, even the conference tournament. And that's probably a good thing because you want those seats to go to the fans. Like that's, I think, part of it too, is the NCAA tournament does a good job with that stuff. So a lot of our scouts stayed home. And, with the Clippers, we just basically turned the war room into NCAA Central and had every game on TV, and everybody, the front office guys would all pile in and watch from there.
To Mo's point about the conference tournaments, I got to go scout conference tournaments. That's how spread out we were. They of course sent me to the Ivy League tournament because, on brand. But my thought is how the NCAA tournament is from a scouting perspective. Are you an org with a good scouting process or a bad scouting process? If you have a good scouting process, you almost don't care about the tournament. Maybe there's like, a Gordon Hayward or someone like that who's at like a smaller school and isn't getting the game to game level of competition, and maybe you try to glean something from that. But for the most part, like you're only gonna trick yourself by a guy having a big run and kind of, oh, he's a winner. Like, the recent example of it is like Jalen Suggs banks in a half court shot, and all of a sudden he has this winning gene, and that should shoot him up draft boards. When it's like, okay, like we're indexing on the wrong things if that affects anything at all in the draft process. So I think if you know what you're doing, you're kind of done and you're just kind of watching because it's fun. If you're scrambling, then you're paying a lot of attention, and that's how you fool yourself because you're getting just a snapshot of a guy.
And I would say, like, there are certain guys that have more at stake. I'm talking about in the players' regard. Let's put it this way. Brandon Miller gets knocked out early in the first round. If Bama were to lose second round or early in the Sweet 16, he's still going top 3. Like, it's not, off court stuff aside. But in terms of the on the court basketball stuff, it's not going to change anything. for him. Whereas there are other guys, Jalen Suggs a great example, Gordon Hayward, where a deep run where they have really impressive moments, and especially guys that are playing in mid-majors that start playing against tougher competition. I think it helps a little bit in that end. But I think ultimately when it comes to drafting, and we'll talk more about this in the draft, this is all part of a puzzle. It's a small piece to the puzzle. That's really kind of the deal. And you can kind of overrate it the way Seth talked about it, where you get too hyped on a guy because he had this unbelievable run. And now you've drafted a player where you're like, I'm not sure he can play.
Well, let me ask you guys this, because I don't think that the top of the draft is going to change at all, really, from this. Number one, a lot of the top 5, 6, 7 guys aren't even in the tournament.
Right.
They're not playing NCAA basketball, which is in and of itself a unique situation and very new, and probably what the future is looking like. But what about fringe guys who are back half of the second round? Can they play themselves up into the first round? Could a guy who's maybe undrafted play himself into the back half of the second round? Or how often do guys who might be second round picks play themselves into being undrafted free agents because a team says, hey, don't go to the combine, don't go to any of these other showcase events, don't work out for anybody, and we got a contract waiting for you. We'll have you signed up before Summer League. We'll have you ready for Vegas. How often does that happen?
Anytime that happens, I think that's an indictment of the process.
I agree. Yeah.
That, like, if you have to wait to the tournament to, oh, well, look at this guy. Where have you been?
Right.
Like,
there's a lot of and there are scouting departments like that, unfortunately, right. But there is some of that. And again, Seth said it perfectly. If you're cramming now, yeah, you've been late to the party, and I think you're really in trouble and have a higher ability to be fooled, because this isn't something like, the tournament's also wonky. Like just in that sense, it's weird things happen throughout these games, and you kind of just go. It's hard to say to really come away with massive draft stock implications off of that.
It's one of the most watched sporting events on the planet every year. And you never know how guys are going to respond to that when they're out there. And this is any big kind of tournament like this, right? Like the World Cup is like this. But the Virginia game, the end of that Virginia game was one of the craziest finishes I've seen, where, the guy gets trapped, and he's probably been trapped like that a million times playing basketball. And it just so happened that this time was the first round of the NCAA tournament. And he throws the worst pass he's probably thrown in his life.
They'd have been better off if he just threw it out of bounds.
It's true. Or kind of jump ball or anything
You're giving me flashbacks to one of my high school coaches. You're going to throw that pass, throw it in the stands. At least we get back on defense. And right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I just guys do play themselves up, and you get look at Steph Curry. He went on this run. That goes to show. But for every Steph Curry, there's a Johnny Flynn. And I had Johnny Flynn was the Big East tournament, not the NCAA tournament, but it's still kind of the same dynamic. So there's, sometimes guys work out, sometimes they don't. But the tournament isn't the thing that's going to tell you why.
A little bit of breaking news from ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. Lonzo Ball is going to have another knee surgery. This will be the third surgery on his left knee in the last 14 months. He hadn't played since January of last season. And this is a bummer. This knee situation for Lonzo has been, a topic of conversation for us since it happened, basically, because we felt like he was such an important piece of that team. And now this is another just completely lost season, and probably going to start eating into next year when you start thinking about rehab, and you're just hopeful he can be healthy, maybe training camp, maybe Christmas at this point. But bad news for Chicago.
I think it's the whole year. I think it's.
I think.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a type of surgery. I'm very terrified for Lonzo's career at this point.
I think the baseline assumption it has to be that he's done.
Yeah,
like if he gets back on the court in the NBA court ever, I think I will be pleasantly surprised at this point.
Man.
Yeah, I mean it absolutely sucks. He was unbelievable. He had really kind of found a great role, as a player. Worked on his shot in New Orleans. Was him and Caruso in Chicago defensively last season were really unbelievable. And now you're just at the point where it's like, I mean, shit, man. Like, there's not really much you can say. It's just depressing in that sense. But it also goes to tell people that, like, again, the hallway is never as long as you think it is. And that goes in terms of the length of these guys' career and things like that. So, this news just absolutely blows.
I think this is also a useful, and I'm not saying that this is like any sort of like bad decision overuse injury, but I think this is useful context to carry along alongside the sort of the load management risk, resting players, holding players out with injury. You don't need that many examples of guys just being done. Brandon Roy playing in a playoff series where he probably shouldn't have. That illustrates kind of why you can't really blame teams for wanting to be cautious. You can't frankly want to blame players for wanting to be cautious with this kind of stuff, because it can be over fast if things go wrong. And I don't think we, in the discussion of that, we take that into account nearly as much as we should. In that it's sort of one game versus you play the wrong one more game and your career's never the same, or possibly even just over.
I also think fans have a tendency to underestimate injury severity. We've gotten so used to a guy tearing his ACL, and it's no longer that big of a deal. They get it repaired, they come back. In basketball, you see more of a drop off, but football, there are guys tearing their ACL and they're back on the field before the season's over. So, I mean, we've seen this kind of crazy turnaround. So medical science has kind of fooled us a little bit into thinking that situations like the one Lonzo's dealing with just doesn't happen anymore. We bring up all the old guys that ran their knees down, but the truth is there's probably more guys now than we even think about that aren't in the league due to health issues. It's just that maybe they're fringe guys, the bigger stars, the bigger names get a little bit more time to hang on a little bit. But yeah, I mean, not to turn this away from a guy's career into what the team does, but where do the Bulls go from here?
Well, where the Bulls go from here is they've been sinking for quite a while at this point. Like, I feel like they've I think last year was more of the fluke. I think this is the situation. I think they end up just having to go into a total rebuild. And I think they have to look to try to find a sign and trade with Vooch. Can't just let him walk for nothing. I think they might want to look to spin off Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. I mean, right now the future is very bleak for them. I just watching the way they play now, they're an afterthought, man. Like, that's the honest truth of it, is like, we really don't see much about them, don't hear much about them. It's their relevancy is gone at this point, and I think they just need to jump in and start looking to reload here. And nobody likes to say the tear it down and rebuild deal, but this is where they're at.
One of the two most depressing team situations in the league, alongside somewhat ironically Charlotte, which in part of why Charlotte's is depressing is, we're at the point where we have continuing health concerns over LaMelo Ball.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess if they go into a full teardown, Zach LaVine is probably the most coveted piece that they've got. I'm assuming that would be on the table, although it just seems like, I don't know. Can they do a full teardown? They're not that, on paper, they're not that bad of a team, but I guess they're not good enough to double down on what they've been doing. So maybe this is the precursor to a summertime teardown for the Bulls.
I mean, they're 11th right now in the standings as of Thursday when we're recording. It's not even like it's not like they're tearing down a 6 seed playoff team. It's an older roster. DeMar DeRozan's not getting younger. Vooch is a free agent, and let's be honest, he wasn't really good for them this season. Like there's a lot of that stuff. They were kicking the tires on whether they should blow it up this trade deadline, and whether there was rumors they were going to trade Zach LaVine. And I think that's something that I think we're going to see in the offseason. And if his contract was a little smaller, he probably would have been on another team.
Today's show is brought to you by Indochino. Visit Indochino.com and use the promo code AthleticCBB to get 10% off any purchase of $399 or more. Wedding planning is intimidating, but finding the perfect suit just shouldn't be. Indochino makes it easy to get a fully customizable suit right from home. I personally got some custom tailored shirts from Indochino recently, and they fit me perfectly. They become my go-to button-up. It's hard to find off-the-rack clothes when you have broad shoulders and long arms, guys. Well, Indochino will let you decide the suit you've always wanted to have and fine-tune every single detail. From lapels to linings, monograms to pocket flaps, you can get whatever you want at Indochino with suits starting at just $499 and fitted shirts at $89. It's bespoke without the premium price tag. You just set up your measurement profile on their website, choose the fabrics and customizations that you want, and then you get them delivered right to your door. When planning your wedding, get a suit as unique as you with Indochino. Go to Indochino.com and use the code AthleticCBB to get 10% off any purchase of $399 or more. That's INDOCHINO.com. Promo code AthleticCBB.
Well, from teams that, or a team at least, that may be blowing it up to teams that have been tanking all year, we wanted to take a look at the younger teams. We've spent a lot of time focused on the contenders for a lot of this season. I mean, this has been a historically competitive NBA season. So rightfully, we've been looking at the front runners. And I think it's worth taking a look at some of these younger teams, guys, and in particular, the way that they've been finishing out the season as we come down the stretch. I think every team is down to about 13 games or so or less. I want to start with the San Antonio Spurs because they've just been really, really awful. And then they win some of these games, right? They started out the season so competitive. Then their tank improved. And then they beat the Denver Nuggets the other night. They lost. They had a massive losing streak for months, but they somehow have figured out a way to just be more competitive in these games toward the end. So I want to ask you guys, is this just tanking to perfection, or have they actually been developing these players all season and we're kind of seeing the fruits of some of that labor?
I think since they've been out of the spotlight, you forget they've kind of gone through some stuff this year. They've had a fair bit of injuries to some of their more important players. The Josh Primo situation early in the year, I think I had to take some wins out of the sail just because that's just so weird. From a team side, obviously, assuming the allegations, terrible situation, but just from a guy was in the next locker and now he's gone. What happened? And so I actually talked to some people with the Spurs, like at Sloan, and they were, about the morale around the team, and like the silver lining was that they weren't having to try to tank because they were having these guys out all the time, like Devin Vassell missing time and things like that. So they sort of were playing the young guys because everyone else was hurt, essentially. So maybe not as much by design as just sort of by happenstance. Now maybe they're getting a little healthier, and
it's funny when Devin Vassell's the old guy.
Right.
They're playing the young guys and because Devin Vassell's hurt. No, the thing about them, and we should say before the game Friday, they're 4-4 in their last 8. Like that's actually probably been their best stretch in 2023 with how they've been playing with everything. And I think the truth about this team when they're fully healthy is they're a team that they're just a star away from being a really fun young team. They are a Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson type of team where you start going like, this can be a very exciting squad. They have all the pieces. They just need that drink stirrer and things like that. I think Jeremy Sohan's a good piece for them. I think his willingness to shoot free throws one-handed and everything, I think goes a long way. Just his development and stuff. I like what they have. I think here's the thing, Dave, as I ramble on, just it's so important right now for all these young teams. Every team we're going to talk about, how you end this season. I don't give a shit about the tanking aspect of it and whatnot at this point. How you end this season kind of sets up next season and your approach to a degree, obviously, unless you're going to make massive moves. I think this is an important time for all these teams and organizations as they look forward to next year and what type of team it is. It's culture building time for them. And I think that's really important. And I think San Antonio has kind of what they want. I think now it's just try to play hard here, finish this out competitively.
Yeah.
I think that's it. That's a good point. When you talk about end the season, we're not talking about, well, we're going to try to go 8-2 in our last 10 games. We've talked about quality reps so much, and so many times you see very frequently you see a team kind of that's been they just play out the string, and guys are gunning for their numbers, and random crazy lineups, and it's just you're playing the fakest of fake games essentially, and not doing that. Basically, like, we've got stuff we can work on. Let's work on our stuff. And if we can be competitive, we can play close games, we can get competition, actual competition, not just being out there running around. Like, let's make use of that time. You only have so much time you have to develop players. This is an important time to do that. But to do that, it has to be directed, it has to be intense, it has to be intentional. And that can be hard in this situation, but it's important to do it.
Yeah, and I would say, sorry, Dave, again, just to kind of keep jumping in on this, look at some of the teams in the past that have had this, young teams. Phoenix going 8-0 in the bubble, obviously made a big trade for Chris Paul the following year. But look at the steps Memphis has taken across the way on their road throughout the seasons. Like, they've climbed the ladder a bit. And I think that's an important aspect of it. So that's actually why this is the perfect time to talk about them, because we're not going to talk about them again until the draft lottery.
Yeah. And side note, it's also why I like Atlanta getting Quinn Snyder in there now as opposed to this summer. Gives him time with these guys. I mean, they're going to get a head start on training camp. I think he even said that in one of his post games or something like that. They're getting a head start on training camp, and not to mention the head start on figuring out what they're going to do with Trae Young.
Today's show is brought to you by Morgan & Morgan. For more information, visit forthepeople.com/NBA show. Did you know that in 2020, there were over 5 million car crashes? That's over 15,000 a day, 600 an hour. Now, that number is incredibly shocking, but if you were injured in an accident, wouldn't you want to be made whole? Well, if you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and more than 800 lawyers. With over $15 billion recovered for clients, Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is extremely easy, and it's more like using an app than hiring a lawyer. If you're ever injured in an accident, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/NBA show or dial pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/NBA show or pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement.
I want to kick it to the young teams, stay there. Another team that's closing things out much better than they've been all season. And we have hammered this team all year. The Houston Rockets, they've won 2 straight. They won 4 of their last 7, playing a little bit of playoff spoiler right now, which I like that quite a bit for a young team. I think about just inspiring them to play competitive games, and these games actually matter. They might not matter for them, but they matter for the season. They matter for the league, and getting these guys up for these sorts of games is big. Now, they had a little help because Anthony Davis didn't play for the Lakers, which that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe for if they don't make the playoffs, we'll talk about that. But I thought that the Rockets, they've shown up more often in these games down the stretch. And Mo, you and I have been in particular really hard on them. The lack of organization, just lack of effort at times on both ends. And I think that they've been better for the last 10 to 12, 15 games or so.
Yeah, I think they've kind of sort of understand here a little bit. They're the team I think that probably this part's going to suck. They're the team that I think is going to benefit the least from this stretch because I think they're going to make massive moves. I think they're going to, and maybe not good ones, but I think, believe the rumors out there about James Harden and whatnot. And they're trying to go out of their way to tank for Vic. And I think that's the point where they're at. But they had 2 nice wins. I don't care that Anthony Davis didn't play for the Lakers that night, which is also very questionable for the Lakers in that regard, considering what they're chasing for, but also beat Boston the night before. Like those are quality wins right there. And I think you're watching them and you're hoping that they're beginning to get it. More structure, more fluidity. I love Şengün, so I'm always just run the offense through Şengün type of stuff. But I think this is hopefully going to be the start for them to figure some things out if they're not going to make crazy ass moves in the offseason.
Big thing is I'm not a big fan of like necessarily reading into like late season numbers on sort of these teams, but just from a note, like visibly seems to know what he's doing, knows where his shot's gonna come, knows how to get his shots in better spots, slowing down a little bit. Jabari Smith has been, it's been a very nice stretch for him. Whether it continues, but for as rough as the early part of the season was, and I think that's part of the reason why we hammered them so much, is he was a player who his game probably requires some structure around it to really function well. He's sort of starting to figure out how to operate on the NBA floor. And, for them long term, that's obviously a pretty big deal. And just if he can get, the last 25 games of the season, he can play kind of real basketball. That's just a boon for them.
How about Detroit? The James Wiseman project has been fully just unleashed on the world. I actually think Wiseman has been fine up there.
I don't like
Detroit doesn't feel like they have much of a plan, right? Like it's a lot of Killian Hayes.
I mean, some of that is injuries.
Yes,
Cade is
of
out.
course. They don't have Cade Cunningham.
But the Wiseman thing, I kind of hate it because I sort of feel like Jalen Duren has shown enough that doing the guy, the guy not looking at his girlfriend as the other girl walks by meme with Wiseman, similar player, like a guy who's sort of shown his limitations already, and you're spending more kind of your playing time, of your reps capital on that than the guy who's younger and probably has more upside at this point because he hasn't filled in those unknown boxes negatively. I don't like that as chasing that shiny object. And so I think that kind of goes to you're not having a plan. It's just like, well, shit, this is a guy who we liked in the scouting process. Let's run him out there and see what happens.
Yeah, it's not just so much that. I like what we're seeing from Jaden Ivey. I think more as a playmaker. His shooting numbers are down post All-Star break, but I think post All-Star break his assist numbers are up. He's averaging around 7 assists right now. Like I like him trying to get the reps as a playmaker in this opportunity and get more touches there and try to create shots for other guys and things like that, because that's really what's going to help them when they get. Listen, this team's going to suck because they didn't have Cade for most of the year and things like that. And I feel you, Seth, on the Duren versus Wiseman thing. I'm also just like, get as much young talent and then you'll figure it out as you go. You know what I mean? Like, let's just be honest. They get the number 1 pick. They're getting Victor Wembanyama. Both of those guys are gone.
That's right.
It's not a instance in that place, where it's just, all right, let's just see, take a flyer. It didn't cost them much to really get him or anything like that. And I think for me, what I want to see is my eyes are more on Ivy and how will he continue to kind of develop here down the stretch of these last few games. I don't expect them to win games. I want them to just be competitive, and I want to see him continuing to be a playmaker, and it'd be nice if he can make a few more shots. But I like that this is the opportunity for him right now.
Yeah. The Orlando Magic since the 1st of February, guys. It's about 18 games. They have a better net rating than the Pelicans, the Heat, the Pacers, the Jazz, the Nets, the Blazers, and then all of the bad teams that are real bad. 20th in net rating, which, by the way, not good, but better than some teams that are going to be in the playoffs since February 1st. And since the first of the year, really, they've been okay. Like, this is like a bad middle of the road team, which is a win for a team this young. I mean, they've got Paolo Banchero. They're going to have the rookie of the year, and they're okay. That feels like a success.
Yeah, I'm all in. I like the way they're playing. I've been on them from the beginning. The Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero kind of a cop buddy movie is going to be a fun one. I like what they have going with that stuff. I like what Jamal Mosley's done as a coach for this team. I think he's done a great job kind of just keeping the guys engaged with everything that they have. And again, this is one of those teams I really want to see finish strong. I was hoping they'd make a run for the play-in. It seems like that's far-fetched, but I wanted them to chase it. And I think they tried. They just had some losses that go along the way. I want them to start learning how to win games down the stretch. And I think this is the opportunity right now for them with where they're at. Because I think they're not that far, man. They're really not. I think a competent point guard. I like the pieces they have around them. I would have loved to have seen if part that sucks, if Jonathan Isaacs didn't get hurt again, that would have been a very interesting piece for them to see how that goes forward. But like, this is one of those young teams to keep an eye on that we're going to be talking a crap ton about next year in the offseason, going like, oh, watch for them. They're going to be the it team.
The one note of caution, and I don't want to read too much into this because, rookie wall, the amount of usage probably starting to show up on scouting reports more, is Banchero's efficiency has really tailed off as the season has gone along. And I think that, as much as anything, has contributed to them. They're 8-10 over that stretch you talked about, and I think with a little bit better play in close games, probably could have been more like 12-6 or something like that. And if that's the case, then they're right there in the play-in hunt. And it's like they've put themselves. We were hoping they would put themselves in a position to challenge for the play-in, and they haven't done that. But they put themselves in the position to put themselves in the position and just haven't been able to close out games. So yeah, as Mo said, like you like the foundations they have there, and they, I kind of took shots at Jalen Suggs earlier, but like they're kind of figuring out like, what Jalen Suggs is going to be. Okay, he's not going to be the guy you thought he was going to be when you used the top 5 pick on him. But he's kind of turning into like a Caruso type of player. He's not that good defensively yet, but he's showing some things. And if, okay, he becomes a very useful role player, great. We know what that is. We know he's not the point guard, so we need to go get a point guard. But at least we know this is going to be a useful rotation guy, assuming we can like make the second contract money work right for what that level of player is.
I could see them. They might be fighting for the play-in next year, like 7 or 8 seed next year. If a little bit of growth internally, they get a good point guard. Maybe they get a good young guy in the draft. They've got so much talent. And I really like what they have going and what they're building. And finally, guys, what has to be considered the best young team in the league, and it really wasn't that long of a tank. Oklahoma City Thunder shocked the world. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is he's incredible.
Didn't shock me. I was telling y'all last year, play the fucking guy. I was telling you last year, give him the minutes he deserves. Didn't shock me, Dave. Did not shock me.
So we just tossed out that everything Mo just said is correct, and we'll give him his props. Good job, Mo. We'll pat Mo on the head, and no, I'm kidding.
No, not pat me on the head.
Yeah, I know.
I'm kicking both of your asses. I crushed y'all on the Elam ending, and I'm beating you on this one.
I mean, he's good.
So I think if OKC was in a different location on the map, we'd be starting to have that. Well, I know we've given the award to Paolo Banchero, but Jalen Williams for Rookie of the Year
is good, man.
Oh my god!
How did
first of all, both Jalen Williams are good.
Yes,
but
which is a problem.
Yeah, but the Santa Clara Jalen, I get J.
It's J Dub. J Dub. It's J Dub.
Is like that. Like the
guard
player
guard Jalen Williams is J Dub. Big Jalen Williams is J Will.
They're the same size though. So, but the 3-player combo with the size and playmaking and ball handling ability of Williams and Josh Giddey, who's sneakily kind of, I think, developed. Mo, you and I were talking about this, where he's a guy who doesn't. Both him and Shea actually are kind of guys who don't look like they make a move, but they're just kind of by guys. And you combine that with he is a high level passer. Like that is a starting point that you are envious of to put talent around. I am.
He's a dying breed. He's a connector that we're kind of losing these guys here a little bit that can just absolutely play make in the way that he's doing. Yeah, his shot needs work with all that. So's a lot of guys. But I think he has an absolute skill that puts him on the floor that makes him a weapon. And I think it's that passing in the way that he does things. And, it was a while ago, but Seth, do you remember that bounce pass from the sideline out of bounds in the deep corner a long time ago? Like, you were the one that was talking about it. Like, it was a beautiful bounce pass and timed perfectly. I can't remember who, otherwise we'll pull the clip. But what I love about OKC is that they are actually trying to make the play in this year. And I think, it goes a long way for that. And I think the important thing is they're playing games that matter in March and April, and that's the stuff we're talking about. Games that matter. And for them to be in that mix right now, I mean, they've won 3 in a row. They're at the 9th seed right now as we're talking. It's going to be interesting. They need to maintain that. And I want to see them start taking the progression of winning. And I'm going to take a quick shot because, Seth, do you think if maybe they were in Seattle, your boy Jalen would have some Rookie of the Year odds?
I mean, I'm, as a son of the Pacific Northwest and someone who wore a Sonics sweatshirt the whole time at Sloan, you kind of know what I think about that. I want to add one more thing about why we should be very big on their future. A lot of times these young teams, they come up and then maybe they reach the point where they kind of hit a ceiling where they've had a coach that can only get them so far. I'm not like ready to go all the way but I think you have to be, when you talk about the good young coaches in the game, do you start anywhere but Oklahoma City for who is the most promising young coach in the game right now?
This is a hard conversation to have. Number one, obviously, coaching influence, I think it's hard to judge, but there are so many good, like, first, second, third year coaches in the league right now. I mean, Will Hardy is on your list, right? Mm-hmm. We just talked about Jamal Mosley, Mark Daigneault, obviously, Taylor Jenkins is good. I mean, now he's been there for a little bit longer, but I think that we're at the point where there aren't many bad coaches, but Mark Daigneault might be an excellent coach. Like, he might be a guy who we're considering a top 5 guy here before too long.
So here's the thing is, and Mo, you and I have talked about this. Some other people have hit this on Twitter a lot. Is Oklahoma City might be starting to showcase the bones of what is the next defensive style revolution in the NBA. Yeah. And we've talked all year about the offensive explosion and will defenses catch up. Like, Oklahoma City is the team that is bucking the trend. Mo, you've talked about this a ton of defenses being too predictable. You run a simple action, how you press the button, you get the prize, kind of with how the rotations are going to work. Oklahoma City, they guard early and switch late. And, and just finding that as a thing to counteract how modern offenses are playing. Like, that's the thing that has me kind of excited about where they might go.
And I mean, they get Chet next year.
Yeah, I mean, they get whatever rookie they draft this year and get Chet Holmgren back. And I think that goes a long way. And we'll see how Chet kind of pans out as an NBA player in all of those things. And I know expectations go up and things like that. But this is a team that's going to have high expectations for next year. And that's the next challenge. Like they're going to graduate out of this kind of conversation and go into the next conversation where everybody's going to be like, we expect things from you now. And a lot of teams buckle under that. A lot of young teams kind of fall apart after that. And this is going to be an important stretch for them. The end of this season, hopefully the play-in tournament, maybe even the playoffs, and how they finish there and how they begin next season. This is an important, I don't know how many months that is. Let's just assume 6 month stretch for them and go from there to see how it builds for them. But you got to like what you're seeing from them. This is going to be an exciting team. And I told y'all last year.
It's a perfect time, though, for them to be on their way up. When you consider how many teams are going to be on their way down, how many, there's a changing of the guard that's going to be happening over the next, 3 years, I would say. I mean, LeBron is already arguably not a, top tier player anymore. I mean, the injuries have played a large role in that because when he's out there, he's certainly looked pretty close, amazingly. But, how much longer, and I know he just had a ridiculous game last night, but how much longer is Steph Curry? I mean, this is it's already right. The Clippers are kind of, right. This is maybe their last chance. Phoenix, Chris Paul, he's probably not going to be there next year. What does that look like with a 36-year-old Kevin Durant or however, is he 35 next year? Adding a year to his age. But I think that if you're Oklahoma City, I don't know how they pull it off, but they are in position to go out and take a swing this summer and maybe be really good next year. I don't know who the person is. I don't know who the player is, but they have the pieces. They could really make something happen.
It'll never happen, but there's been that little bit of whisper about Joel Embiid not being wild about being in Philadelphia. It'll never happen, but man, drop him on that team. Let's go.
I'll just say Oklahoma City is a beautiful little town. It's a beautiful little town. I like it quite a bit. I don't know if it's a Joel Embiid sort of town.
No, it's not a Mo DeKeel type of town.
Oh, that's a shame. It's a really nice place. It's super walkable. I love the little green space downtown. But now we're getting into weeds. It seems like a pretty good place to wrap up. For Seth Partnow and Mo DeKeel, I'm Dave DeFore, and this has been Nerder. She wrote on the Athletic NBA Show.